Okay, let's go to something else. So I've got a close-up from actually that same scene. And basically what I'm going to do here is essentially just show you a couple of other tools in the arsenal that are not necessarily color tools. So once again, I've done a base grade here, and I've done this with a lookup table, I believe. Yes, I did. But I can do it without the lookup table as well. And let's try that way. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new version of this and start from scratch. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put an S-curve on this. So I'm going to pull the contrast way up, maybe to that, and then raise the exposure so that I have a little more of a normal grayscale. And a little more, maybe a little more contrast, and that's not too bad. And now, as before, it's looking kind of yellow-greenish, not very good, so I'm going to go ahead and rebalance. Um, and because I haven't put on the color matrix that's part of that LUT, the saturation is still low. So I'm going to raise the saturation to have some color interface and in the image in general, and then just rebalance a little bit away from that very saturated flesh tone. And something like that is a pretty good starting point. Um, Now let's look at a couple of other things. One of the things that we're often called upon as colorists to do is what we call beauty work. Now, compositors often do this in a visual effects program, but we can also do it in most color programs. If you notice, there are some heavy bags under her eyes here. And in most cases, in order to make a look better, we'd want to tone that down. So one approach that we can take is basically to put some kind of blur or mist effect over this area and smooth that all out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new node and go right to my window controls and go to this curve window. This will let me draw a shape, and it'll be a Bezier curve. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a Bezier curve around this area underneath her eyes. We'll adjust that just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and adjust softness. Now on these windows I have inside and outside softness, so I'm going to adjust the inside, pull it in, and then add a little bit of outside softness as well. So if I look at this alone, you'll see that what I've done is I've made this nice soft edge window right around her face, around the part of the face that I want to affect. Now at this point I want to do my effect, so I'm going to go to these blur controls right here, and first let's just do a straight blur to see what that does. If I raise the radius, it's going to create a blur. And you'll notice that as I add that, it does flatten it out, but it also gets rid of those harsh lines. Now, in most cases, you would add a little bit of noise on top of this, a little bit of grain-like effect, so that it doesn't look quite so unnatural. I don't have that in Resolve, so basically I'm not going to do that. But I do want to show you a different way of doing this. In Resolve, we also have what's called a mist effect, and in a mist effect, it's going to basically overlay another copy of the image and blur just the top layer. So it won't be quite as drastic. So let's go ahead and change that mix value, and you'll notice that it's not getting quite as flat as it did using the blur approach. Now if I turn this on and off, you'll see what we're accomplishing here. And if I go back to normal size on the image, you'll see that it's not quite as noticeable as it was when I'm really close in, but it's doing its job. It's getting rid of that really harsh thing underneath her eye. Um, and normally we'd want to do this for both eyes. So let's go ahead and do another shape, and we're going to do it on the same node so that we're affecting the same way. So I'm going to go ahead and add another one of these power curves and draw it over here. So let's do this. Let's again reshape this just a little bit here. Oops. Okay, and we'll give it a little bit of inside softness and outside softness, just like we did on the other one. And when I turn these off, you'll notice that now we're affecting both eyes. So if I turn this on and off, you'll notice that that softening effect is happening on both eyes, which is exactly what I want. Now here's one problem, though, that you encounter when you try to do these things in a color correction program, which is that as soon as the picture moves, these windows no longer line up. So what a lot of programs, including this one, provide are tracking controls for these windows. So let's choose this one first. What I can do is activate an automatic tracker. What it will do is it will look inside where the shape is and try to pick out as many unique detail points that it can track as it can. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. You notice it's picking out a bunch of them and moving the window as she moves. So that's exactly what I want. Now when I move this back, you'll notice that it's following the movement of her face. Now I could do the same thing with the other one. Let's go back to where these actually line up. I think right about there was where I drew them the first time. So we'll go ahead and track this one as well. Okay, we'll stop it there. Now if I roll this back and play this, you'll notice that it just follows exactly her movements and the shape of her face. So using tracking to achieve these kinds of effects is something that's become very, very common. And it's what allows us to do a lot of things like beauty work within a color correction programs. Once again, I'll go back to normal size and just play this, and the effect is subtle enough that you really don't notice it, but if I turn it off, you'll see it. So off and on. And when it's on, the tracking basically kind of just makes it stick to where it's supposed to be. So once again, common techniques and things that colorists are responsible for these days. Okay, let's go to another image that we're going to go through sort of a colorist analysis of. Without going through the mechanics of doing a base grade, I'm just going to enable the base grade that I did. In this case, I did not do it with the LUT. I did it with the same technique that I just showed you using contrast and offset. But suffice it to say that this is a pretty good starting point. Now, as I look at this image, once again, the important detail is all of these people. I don't really care about the table. I don't really care about the set. I don't care about the floor. I want you to be looking at them. So in order to do that, I have to decide what to de-emphasize to draw your attention to that area. So as I look at this, I realize, all right, there's this bright kick on the table that's kind of distracting because as I'm trying to look at her, this is sort of in the lower half of my vision. I look at the floor and this side is nice and shadowed so we can notice them, but this is getting all the light from this window. That's a natural byproduct of shining some lights through the window, but in point of fact, as a storytelling thing, I don't want to see that. I don't want that to be so bright because it's drawing my attention. So let's go through these things one at a time. The first thing I'm going to do is knock down this area on the floor. And I'm basically going to do that. Now what I did here, once again, is an area isolation. I simply drew a mat and then did a simple, believe I used video gain. Yes, I did. And brought down the gain so that it's still brighter than the left side, but it's nowhere near as distracting as it was before. So it looks natural because it is under the window, but it's not grabbing my attention anymore. Probably go a little bit darker than that if I wanted. The next thing I'm going to tackle is a table highlight. And I'm going to do that by doing that. So I'm just knocking down that hot highlight. Now, how did I do that? Well, I did two things. First, I did a luminance key. Now, the luminance key basically isolates by brightness. Um, but because I've also got Because I've got other areas that are equally as bright, I need to use a window to isolate just that table highlight. So by putting this window around it, I don't get the other areas isolated, just the table, and that's basically what I want. So by isolating the table, once again, I can simply use either a video gain control or a highlight control of some sort and go ahead and knock down the brightness of it. In this case, I used a highlight control. Um, but essentially, I went from that to that. So the highlight is still there in the table, but it's not a huge bright kick that's distracting me. Um, and now to add the final touch, I want to kind of knock down everything on the edges. So once again, I'm going to use a vignette to do that. And the vignette, once again, is affecting the outside edges. So when the window area gets knocked down, the left side gets knocked down, and we go from that to that. Now, once again, just to illustrate that these things all work together to give you an overall effect, I'm going to go ahead and turn all of them off and just show you the base grade again, which is a nice image. Once again, it was photographed well. And then I add all of the changes that I made, and all of a sudden, you're not looking at the floor, you're not looking at the table, you're not looking at the edges, you're now looking at the people, just like it was intended. So once again, directing the viewer's attention uh, by doing some things that are difficult for the director of photography to do, because it's very difficult to do these things in a live environment.